Welcome, everybody. This is our very first episode of Pine Grove's inaugural podcast, Beyond the Grove. It's very exciting.
I know.
I'm Colleen. I work here at Pine Grove, and I'm being joined by my awesome colleague, Russ. Russ, welcome to our first episode.
So stoked to be here. I mean, the first episode, this is groundbreaking. Here we are, Beyond the Grove.
It is so groundbreaking. So for our audience that is listening, Pine Grove is located in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Can we help people, children, teenagers, grown-ups, with addiction and mental health care? And today, we're talking about a topic that a lot of people, I think, have questions about and want to know more about, because chances are you have a loved one who's been affected by addiction and has struggled with addiction. Plus, when somebody asks you, what is addiction? What do you say?
Well, this is I've been doing this for a long time, but I like to start off by saying the truth resists simplicity. Like, it's complicated, right? It's a nuanced conversation. And I know that's why we're having this discussion today, but
Right.
so a lot of us are taught, like, either directly or indirectly, that addiction is an issue of willpower, that it's an issue of like a moral failing. But what we know to be true now is that it follows more of a disease type model, right? And without getting into a lot of the jargon and a lot of the weeds of the clinical stuff, we see the kind of the brain, whether it's chemicals or it's behaviors,
Right.
the brain kind of gets hijacked, right? And we learn it. The brain starts to process things like stress, things like mere survival, right, in a much different way than somebody that didn't have a struggle with an addiction.
Right.
So we kind of go at it from that. And when we talk about the addiction as a brain disease, what we're talking about is two components. Addiction seems to be chronic, which means it's been going on for a long time, right? And it's also progressive, which means it's constantly getting worse if it's not held in check, right? And so that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at this our brain being rewired either by substances or behaviors, about the way we process stress and about the way we that our mere survival could be threatened, right? If we don't
Right.
have this chemical, or we don't have this behavior to kind of lean on in times of, again, stress or fear or those type things.
I think you brought up a really good point, particularly about willpower. I think that is something that a lot of people think about. And why does, for example, this child struggle with addiction, whereas this other child does not? Or why do some people who are brought up in the same household, who grew up together, why does one child struggle with addiction while the other doesn't? Why can't somebody just recognize that the way they've been living and the behaviors they've been engaging in, whether that is just substances or behaviors, why can't they just recognize that that's unhealthy and just make better choices? Why can't you just make better choices? Sometimes people think about that.
Just stop it. Just sit, right? This is a Bob Newhart skit. Just stop it. And the reality is, it's not that easy, right? Because again, there's been changes in the brain about the way our experiences are processed, and so people they don't possess that ability anymore. So at one time there might have been a choice, right? A choice as to whether or not I use the substance or I engage in this behavior.
Where
But again, because the brain is rewired in such a way, the choice is kind of out the window. It's like, I need this thing to survive now, right? And so that's what sets it apart. The big book actually talks about this a little bit. It talks about the fact that certain people seem to have a physical allergy to a substance. They liken it to an allergy,
okay.
right? And so we can see that, and we see that it doesn't manifest in some people. It does manifest in others, right? And so the approach from certain family members when it becomes like, why can't you just be more like your brother?
That's right.
Like, that a Rubicon of sorts is crossed where they're not able to do that anymore
Right.
because of the rewiring of the brain in such a way.
Well, that brings up another common question that people have. So, somebody, a family works to help their loved one go to treatment or go to what we'll call rehab.
Yeah.
And so then the question that's asked is, will my loved one be cured? Can you be cured of addiction?
So we don't talk about really in terms of a cure. And I know people come to, first of all, let's talk a little bit about what rehab is.
Oh, absolutely.
So rehab is just a place of love, care, and compassion where people can have the space that they need to heal, right?
Sure.
You want to be around other people that are trying to do what you want to do. If you're trying to engage into a life of recovery, you want to be around other people that are trying to do that, right?
Right.
And so rehab kind of offers that space to be able to do that. And I say all the time, like, people don't grow and change where they're merely informed and educated. They grow and change where they're loved and accepted, right? And so I think that the environment that we kind of try to create in rehab provides that. It provides that safety, a sense of safety. And the other thing is we try to make it as much like real life as possible, like, because we want the things that we're teaching to combat the addiction on a day-to-day basis, right?
Right.
To be able to translate into your real life, right? So one of the examples that I like to throw out often is we have a cookout every week. Yeah, some people have never known what it's like to cook out without substances, right?
Yeah.
And so we want that stuff to translate, you know. So that's kind of what rehab is. And I'm sorry, I kind of deviated from your original question, but just to give some context about what the experience is like.
Well, I think you brought up a good point, and another another sort of phrase that you hear a lot when you were talking about what do people do in rehab and what rehab is like, you often hear the opposite of addiction is connection. And the importance of building that connection while in treatment and establishing those relationships. And there really is a lot too, because addiction can be very isolating. And when you come together and you're in treatment with other people who have been going through similar experiences as you, that's really very important because you feel less alone.
That's right. Addiction grows in isolation. You know, we talk about that, you know, and you said it, I think that's a quote from Johann Hari. It said, the opposite of addiction is not necessarily sobriety, it's connection. And we do see that people that struggle with, again, behavioral patterns or addiction to substances, they do isolate and they have lost a sense of connection. You know, I think the study that was cited was, back in the day, they had this like rat park. You know, they created the rat park.
I have heard of it.
Yeah. So it's like, where they just put a rat like in a cage and they gave it like cocaine water or something and it would go to it. But then when they introduced like other rats and other like fun things to do, like the hamster wheels and stuff to play, like they developed a sense of connection where they didn't have to run back to the drug water all the time.
Right.
And so it kind of emphasizes, I mean, we're not rats, we're humans, but there's some correlation there, right? There's something interesting to be observed. And it's that fact that we're really missing the connection piece.
Well, that's important. You talked a lot about establishing healthy relationships while in treatment and while receiving care, and really being able to set up the foundation for real life experiences. So, our example, a barbecue that doesn't involve substances. And that's a really key point of Beyond the Grove because we want folks to know about the issues that we treat
Right.
and help people with, but also how to be able to use the treatment and use the knowledge and the skills that people learn and develop while receiving care in their real life.
Right. Exactly.
Lots of times, and we talked a little bit about the question about whether or not there's a cure. And so sometimes when families call us and they're asking about treatment or they're asking treatment questions on behalf of their loved one, that's a question that comes up a lot. So if we help our family member through this process, or I help my spouse, or I help my adult child through this process, will they be better?
Right.
And you also and also people talk about how recovery is something that people work on a daily basis,
Exactly.
every day for
Right.
the rest of their life. So really, what is a good answer, would you say, for people who wonder, if we work to make sure that our loved one receives addiction treatment, are they going to be better?
Yeah, we get asked a lot of times about outcomes, right? And you know, without sounding too like pretentious, I mean, I have seen over the course of 20 years that if people follow the suggestions,
Yeah.
right? If they follow the suggestions of the professionals who treat the illness, if they follow the suggestions of people who've gone before them that have done the thing that they're trying to do, they will get better. Like we say, we do recover, right? People do recover. And so, but like you said, it is a day by day thing. It's a one day at a time thing. We talk a lot about progress, not perfection, because I think that one of the other common misconceptions is that with my loved one relapses, that means they failed.
Right.
But again, it's about progress, not perfection. I like to empower people by saying 3 steps forward and 2 steps back is still a net step, right? You're still moving in that direction. And that's what I would want to encourage families to understand, is that it's not necessarily about being fixed. It's about learning a new way of life, right? Learning how to address this issue. And again, I said earlier that, we talk about what addiction is not. It's not a moral failure, right? And we kind of live in an environment, especially geographically where we're located, right? That there can be this idea that like, well, again, you have character defects, and we do have character defects, right? But again, it's not a moral failing. I want to key up on that because in recovery, there is a spiritual component, right? And it's important to understand that while addiction is not a moral failing, there is a spiritual component to recovery. And it's like we see that like when people have a have a spiritual experience, and the literature talks about this, like as a result of working these steps, that we kind of develop this spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
And we see when people don't have something more important than that behavior or that substance, they tend to continue to struggle. And again, I say that there's a spiritual component where people identify a higher power.
Right.
Right. So, and again, that can be, there's no judgment. Like there's,
Sure.
Is there something outside of me that's bigger than who I am that can help me be better?
Right.
I think one of the most powerful words in the 12 steps is the word restore. Right. So it's not about being fixed. It's about being kind of transformed back into the way that you were intended when you were created. Right. It's this sense of, we talk about, you see people that restore old cars or, and they build things or try to, I'm thinking about other things that people kind of bring back to life.
Sure.
That's what this process is about. And again, it's a daily process, and I think it can be hard for families.
Yeah.
Because they're in the middle of crisis, right?
Right.
But it's important to understand like what it was like before, what it's like now, what it can be like in the future, like kind of removing yourself from the crisis a little bit, when things aren't so dramatic and chaotic, I guess. They're in the families are in the throes of that. They can't really see the vision, the future of like living one day at a time in a new way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And it's very hopeful.
Yeah.
It's when you're talking about the word restore and restoring yourself to who you were meant to be and who you were created to be. That's a very hopeful message. And I think you raised a really good point, because I think sometimes people do struggle with that. And they struggle with perhaps receiving care and addiction treatment. And people may worry, maybe if my faith was only stronger, this would not be as big of a challenge in my life. But those two things can coexist.
Yeah, two things can be true at once. And I always say it's okay to have God and a therapist too. Right? I don't say it's like it's okay. And because again, it's about that connection piece. And We need the human connection. We also need the spiritual connection. And that's, again, back to your point about like, do people recover? Yes, people recover in this way. But again, I think it's important that we kind of change our language, the way we think about it. It's not about being cured. It's not about being fixed. It's about living in this recovery lifestyle one day at a time. Right. Because that's all we're really given is today. Right. I think a lot of us, man, we get depressed about the past. We get anxious about the future. Right. And all we really have is like this present moment. And that's what we're trying to get people to kind of wrap their minds around. Right.
It's a really good point. You're right, because lots of times the present is probably one of the hardest time periods to embrace. I think we're always taught to look ahead towards the future rather than pause and think about where we are right now and how that can be really great. And
be where your feet are.
That's right.
Be where your feet are.
Yeah.
That's what Bob Golf would say. But be where your feet are.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I also think that when people talk about addiction, and we touched on this a little bit, I think lots of times people think about drug and alcohol addiction, being addicted to substances. But certainly you can also have an addictive relationship with behaviors.
Right.
And what's really is there a difference between being addicted to a substance as opposed to a behavior?
I think the patterns follow the same, they follows a similar pattern. And again, without getting into and because I'm not a doctor, the brain, we develop certain neural pathways, when we engage in habitual behaviors, right? And again, back to kind of like what addiction is, not to kind of full circle that thought, but it's this idea about, I don't think people use or engage in behaviors necessarily for the pure pleasure. Like, I feel some of the literature kind of shows us that people use oftentimes to avoid pain, not to engage in pleasure.
Right.
So it's like this idea of like, whether it's behavior or chemical, usually engaging in it to try to ease something, right? That's going on, something painful. I mean, I can give you maybe some stories. I got a friend, not a patient, not a former patient, but a friend who's an athlete, right? And had an injury.
Sure.
Right. So go to the doctor. What does the doctor say? Well, you got pain. Here's some medicine.
Medicine, sure.
Right. And a lot of us are taught to trust the guy in the light coat, right? Out there,
Absolutely.
not pulling any shade at all, but just to say that, like, that set off a firestorm, right? Where in an effort to ease pain, right, they're developed a dependence on a certain chemical to do that. And then we know how kind of how that plays out, and to where tolerance is involved, withdrawal for not using it, the withdrawal symptoms for not using it. And so we developed this physiological dependence to where what used to work now doesn't work. Right. And so we need more and more and more and more.
Right.
And so again, I kind of full circle. I didn't maybe answer your original question, but
That kind of pattern
goes the same. Well, it's behaviors or
substances. What do you feel is something that you see in terms of addiction treatment that the rest of the world needs to know about in terms of a hopeful message, those that come out during the process where people are really receiving care for their addiction? What is something for the audience and for people to really know about the hopefulness of the process? Is there sort of a moment where patients that you've worked with have what might be considered an aha moment, or there's a turning point where they recognize that they're on a new path and that a healthier, happier future is available.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different for different people, but I will keep wanting to go back to this idea of a spiritual experience. And when people that have that aha moment, people that say, okay, where it finally clicks for them is when they've made that connection to a higher power.
Okay.
When they've and again, there's no judgment on what that is. Um, and again, when they seek to deepen their relationships with the people around them, you know what I mean? No, I don't know if that answers your question exactly. But I would say it's different for different people. Um, the hope that we provide is that there can be something different. Because again, I think a lot of family members and a lot of people that come to treatment here, they're just kind of in the throes of the crisis, and they're in the darkest places that they've ever been in their life, usually when they come here, right? Or they come to
Absolutely.
treatment.
Right.
Um, and so, I think the hope is what we see other people, and that's a great segue into kind of our alumni program when they get to see
Yeah.
how other people have done it or are doing it one day at a time, right? We talk about, there's a great quote, we get to borrow the hope that other people have, right? So I encourage people, we have alumni events. I encourage the patients, borrow the hope that you're seeing in these people that are here. Right? You might be right now, but if you can borrow the hope that they have, and I challenge the alumni, like, loan your hope out, like,
Right.
come back, sit around the current patients and loan your hope out to them, right?
I think that's an excellent point and an excellent segue because our next episode of Beyond the Grove is going to focus on our alumni program and the importance of ongoing recovery support when it comes to addiction and the importance of developing kind of a network moving forward after you leave treatment and a positive network and a positive community and the ability to continue the relationships that have been built while in treatment and how important that is to ongoing recovery.
Oh, 100%. Tremendously important. And our producer Trish is throwing up the
Oh, it's just showing us we've got 5 more minutes left. Producer Trish is doing an excellent job. We're really excited. But yes, for all of our listeners, that is actually going to be the next topic of Beyond the Grove, is really going to focus on our alumni program. Ultimately, it's about the importance of having ongoing recovery support.
right.
And really that's available for the duration of our patients' lives after they leave Pine Grove. There is life beyond the grove,
Yeah.
and there is support beyond the grove.
Well, I can't wait for y'all to dive into that on another episode because that's really hopeful for a lot of people. To know that they have this as a resource for the rest of their lives. That there's these events that we have where people can come back, tell their story, stay connected with our staff,
Yes.
stay connected with other people that they met here. People come to treatment and there's a lot of fear and trepidation around that. Man, I got to live in an environment around people that I don't know, around caregivers that I've never met, and, have some semblance of trust that, the things that I'm going to learn and the love and acceptance that is going to be offered to me is going to be helpful. And man, a lot of times by the end of that experience, they have newfound brothers, they have newfound sisters that, like, lifelong connections are made, and so it's so important for people to stay connected in that way. Because we said, it's about recovery is about connection, sobriety is about connection. And so, and I love that. And that'd be my encouragement for families as well. For families to come back with their loved ones.
Absolutely.
And so, I know we touched a little bit on the families and again, just if I could, I wanted I didn't want it to go unsaid that, if there's a family member out there of somebody that's struggling with addiction, again, addictive behaviors, addicted to substances, I would encourage you to get help for yourself. I encourage families call me all the time. I got a call last night from a family that's struggling. And my encouragement to them was, hey, are you seeing it? What are you doing to help yourself in this process?
Yes.
What are you doing to get the tools that you need to encourage yourself, to learn the boundaries that you need to set?
Right.
And again, for families, I would say, again, Leah Claire's going to say you didn't put enough quotes in. But another flow, Walt Whitman, be curious, not judgmental. I think if shaming somebody in addiction worked, then, we wouldn't be here. Right? Sorry. It's like, I know that you're in the throes. Some people are in the throes of crisis.
Yes.
But it's like, just take a breath, be curious, get some help for yourself. But then for our families that come here, come back, come back and tell your story again, loan that hope out, borrow some hope if you don't have any. Right.
That's a really good point, Russ. And I just want to thank you for being our guest on the first episode of Beyond the Grow. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, we could talk for hours.
Absolutely. And we're definitely going to have future episodes that are going to talk even more about addiction. So we hope you'll come back, Russ.
Oh, 100%.
And remember, healing doesn't stop here, and neither does hope.
There we go.